welcome back. I hope everybody's had a good afternoon and has got a seat and is comfortable. I'm trying not to be too excited because I feel like that might, I don't know, but I am so excited, I can't even tell you, about the fact that the wonderful Stuart has agreed to host I think a live podcast, but if not live, a podcast of the wonderful OCD Stories for us this afternoon. And that Olivia and Mairéad and Shaun have agreed to share their story as part of this podcast. I'm not going to introduce them, so I'm not being rude. It's just that they're going to introduce themselves as part of the podcast. So there's not anything more for me to say, but just share in my huge excitement and give them a massive, massive round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. I feel like I'm ignoring this side. I'm not. I didn't position this, so sorry. I'm Stuart Ralph. Since December 2015, I've hosted a weekly podcast on OCD where I interview sufferers and family members and professionals, for example, like Dr. Rob Wilson down there. And I'm also a psychotherapist for children and adolescents. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with Shaun.
Yeah, so my name's Shaun Flores. I'm a mental health advocate, been living with OCD for around 5 to 6 years now. My motto is OCD was the worst thing to ever happen to me, and I'm determined to be the worst thing to ever happen to OCD.
It's hard to follow that quote. I'm Mairéad. I also have OCD and have suffered for about 10 years with that, or 12 years actually. And I work in charities and in filmmaking, and I'm really happy to be here.
Hello, my name's Olivia, and I'm an OCD Action helpline volunteer, having worked at the charity a little while ago. And I've had OCD since the age of 7, and I'm now 32. Been through multiple rounds of treatment, and hopefully be able to share some things which might be useful today about that. Thanks.
Thank you. So, and I'm sure many people sitting in the audience have come across their own roadblocks in OCD treatment. That may be just getting access to it. It could be understanding the nuances of it, or OCD flares up in a way you just weren't expecting, or you were doing really well, then suddenly you relapse. So a question I asked on the podcast is kind of, were there any roadblocks to your recovery? And if there were, how did you sort of navigate them and overcome them? And anyone can answer that.
I'm happy to jump in. If you're happy with that. I think I've accessed treatment for OCD through therapy, CBT with ERP and medication, numerous rounds of therapy over the years. And I was thinking about what the biggest roadblock had been, and I think it was myself, which might sound a little bit cheesy, but genuinely the times that therapy hasn't worked, it's been because I wasn't ready to engage with it. So I might have been sat opposite a fantastic therapist who was delivering, absolutely what they were meant to be delivering, but I wasn't willing to accept that help. So I kind of see maybe myself and maybe maybe not myself, but maybe more like a timing thing of when it's been the right time to go and get help and I've engaged with it, that's when it's really worked. That would be my answer to that one.
I think the biggest roadblock to accessing treatment to begin with is what I draw on, is like not knowing what the effective treatment is. And then when you go to the GP and you tell them your symptoms, and sometimes you don't even know that it's OCD at that point, not being sent to the right place. So just kind of the biggest roadblock, I think, is lack of knowledge. So knowing what you're struggling with, knowing how it works, and knowing what the evidence-based treatments are, which I'm sure we've all picked up from today, and then advocating for yourself. I think it's easy for me to say that because I have volunteered on the helpline and had a lot of knowledge given to me and learned a lot through that. But I think that, being able to say what it is you need and want. And I actually, for my last round of therapy, did something called patient choice referral. So I basically filled in a form with my GP that said to my GP that I wanted to be sent to a different service. So still at primary care level and still on the NHS, but I was saying I don't want to be treated in the local services, which was an IAP service, but I want to be treated in the Maudsley in South London, but still at that primary care level, but just letting everyone know that that's an option if you think that the waiting list is much longer in your area, or you're just not sure that the therapist maybe that you've been given is understanding OCD or the effective treatments, then it's always an option to kind of have more choice in the process, even in the NHS. So yeah, and that's how I got my last round of therapy, which was really helpful and got me through a really difficult time.
I don't even know where to start with your question, if I'm going to be honest. Probably the biggest thing for me was life and finances. So I don't know I think most people have probably heard my story, but for people that haven't heard, so last year I listed, this is how you know I'm in a very different place with it, but I was diagnosed with OCD. I had a really big breakdown. I lost my job, lost finances, couldn't do anything. Then I tore my ACL, so in my right knee, completely obliterated the ligaments, ACL, MCL, meniscus, and fractured the right leg. And then after that, ended up 3 days in hospital with pneumonia. So that was that. Then my auntie, unfortunately, had died. Then my cousin, unfortunately, had been murdered. Then after that, my half-brother died. So I thought I was through the worst of everything that was going on. And financially, I was in absolute ruins. And at the time, the therapist that took me on massively helped me when I had nothing. So then I fast-forwarded it to the next year, and I started to try to work again amongst everything that was happening. But then my auntie, terminal cancer, killed her as well. So then that was that. And then after that, I had my surgery on August the 14th. So sick pay from work wasn't a lot in surviving. At this current moment in time, yeah, it was finances, really and truly. I'm still paying through the financial ruins of everything that happened, but for me it was life and finances, but it adds an interesting tale to my story, right?
Yeah, true. Well, that's a lot, right? It reminds me of like Abraham Lincoln, like it's just thing after thing after thing just hit him, and he still somehow managed to keep moving, although I'm sure he was in a great deal of pain. I guess, how did you manage to keep moving?
I don't know, and obviously Johnny's my therapist up there sitting in the crowd at this current moment in time, so I've got to say a really big thank you because I see him every week. But him and I have discussed this, and I've often said there's something in me that just refuses to quit, and I don't know what it is. To this very day, I can't understand it myself. There's something beyond me that I get knocked down, and there's something I get quite excited about. I'm like, oh, all right, cool, so how are we going to get back up from this? And I think I'm massively inspired by the other people around me who are struggling, and I want to show up for them. You know, when I'm having really tough days and I'm having really bad intrusive thoughts and anxiety, I laugh about this, but I go to the gym I'm like, I need to remember to mock the guys that don't do legs. So small things like that, you know, keep me going. But it's most importantly to show up for the people in the world who really do need to be inspired when I struggle to inspire myself. So it's for other people, I think I do it mainly for.
Nice. Well, that's it. It's a purpose bigger than yourself. And then, yeah, Olivia, definitely like timing. Makes perfect sense. I'm sure many people can relate to that. And then Mairéad, with what you were saying about knowing what the right therapy was, there's so many people out there, hopefully no one in here as of today, that they'll go through life not realising ERP is the gold standard. I do that because we shouldn't idealise things. Anyway, the gold standard, it's really good. Obviously, I use it all the time as a therapist. But I think it's then, once you know that, knowing the next stage, okay, well, there's some people that might need a more ACT-influenced, acceptance commitment therapy, ACT-influenced form of ERP to deal with a lot of the rumination, or maybe compassion-focused therapy needs to be brought in. It's those nuances that need to be communicated as well. Obviously, what I'm saying isn't evidence-based, but what I've seen and what Johnny, because he's been mentioned, seen, some people need that, especially if they've gone through several rounds of ERP. But for some people, ERP is like a miracle. OCD recovery is not linear. You know, 2 years ago for me, I hit kind of a bit of a relapse that came out of the blue. I was 5 years clean and doing pretty well. That's clean of OCD. And I have addictions, but not ones you may think. And yeah, it kind of knocked me for 6, and I had to go back and remember everything I tell my clients or work with them on. So how do you guys, and this is similar to the first question, but deal with those highs and lows, those ups and downs?
I think, like, for me at the moment, it's trying not to get too rigid in like where you are in your journey, because I a month ago would have said I feel like I don't struggle daily with this anymore, and then a stressful event happens, or then just suddenly it's there again. And I think just not being too hard on yourself when you feel it coming up again, and remembering that it's not your fault, and trying to draw on techniques that you've learned, or even going for another round of therapy. Like, I'm definitely going to get back on a waiting list. But I think keeping the hope that it can get better is the way I keep going and keep trying, is keeping that hope that people do get better and you can live well. You don't have to live so anxiously and so controlled by it. So I think knowing that you can get better is a good way to keep going.
Yeah, I think when you think about like OCD treatment and stuff, you think you're going to go from like here, like rock bottom, you're going to have treatment and it's just going to be like an upwards path. And it's kind of a bit more like that, isn't it? Like it doesn't go in a straight line, like you said. I think it can be really frustrating, and you must feel that if recently you were so well, like being a therapist and feeling like you know what you need to do, but not being able to do it. And I've been in that position so many times where I'm like, no one can tell me anything else. I know everything there is to know about OCD treatment. I don't need any more help, but actually really needing help. And you could be, you know, the best OCD therapist in the world. If you have OCD, you might still need some support and some guidance with that. And it's a hard thing to kind of accept, isn't it? That like when you feel like you've got all of the tools to beat it, but you can't do it. I think it's a really hard thing to accept, but I think it's a really important thing to accept that actually you don't need to be a hero in that, and kind of like you can go and get more support, and you should go and get more support, and sometimes you just need that guidance from a professional to help you kind of with what you know. And you'll always learn more when you go back as well, like going back to treatment. I remember my most recent course of therapy, I walked through the door and I was like, there's nothing you can tell me, I know everything. And he was like, yeah, I think, you know, let's knock you off your pedestal a little bit. And I learned so much, like actually opening yourself up to that and being like, okay, I actually don't know half of the things that like will help me. But sometimes you just need that helping hand, and accepting that is difficult, but I think it's a really important thing to do.
I think very similar to everyone else, realizing that you're right, it's not linear, it goes in so many different directions, and whilst you rebuild your life from OCD, there's probably so many other things that are happening. But I think one of the things I really hold on to is the fact every day is a different chance. It gives me a chance to appreciate my life very differently from where it once was. And when I first started treatment, I wanted the thoughts gone. I just completely wanted them to be removed, until I realized, all right, these bad boys ain't going nowhere. I'm gonna have to live with these for the rest of my life. From the minute I wake up, sometimes to when I'm sleeping, to when I'm talking to someone, whether I'm on stage and I have intrusive thoughts, I just learned to realize I'm gonna have to accept this. This is a part of my reality. And it left me with a really dark sense of humor, so,
I think that's important. If you can get there, I should say. So I do this with my clients a lot, about tongue-in-cheek, joking with it, taking it to the extreme as a way of getting your brain to shut up. And for me, that really works now. Could I have done it when I was at my worst? Probably not. But I think it's a place to work towards. And my brain just shuts up so quickly if I kind of become the sickest person on earth in terms of my thinking. But that's not for everyone. Most of my clients refuse to do it, and that's okay. I know someone else that both people with OCDs in America, and they used to text each other. They knew their themes, and they would text them, triggering them on purpose, saying the most horrible things over text, like the house is going to burn down, whatever it was, to purposely trick themselves, but do it in like a tongue-in-cheek way. And that's obviously diffusion or unhooking from the content of the thought, because it really doesn't matter what we're thinking. It's all nonsense, mostly. So, from an OCD sense. The other thing, actually, Olivia, what you were saying about we think we know it all, and I was still working with a therapist at that time, and I still needed someone to hold me accountable. It wasn't an OCD therapist though, which is why it also went unnoticed, I should add. But for a whole month, I was doing compulsions because I didn't realise it was OCD. I just thought it was health anxiety. Which technically, it's debatable whether that's anxiety. I think it is. But, although, we did a podcast on it. There you go. I'll link to it. Anyone listening. It just caught me out of the blue. And then a month went by, and I felt like such an idiot, because I was like, how could I miss all of these things I was doing? So it's so subtle, and you need someone How smart you are, not saying I am, but you need someone to highlight it to you. And the same with like weightlifting. I know how to lift weights, but if I had a personal trainer, I know I would be stronger than I currently am. You know, because they push you, which you need in ERP as well. You need someone who's going to compassionately push you to do things that obviously align with your values. Yeah, you know, we've said different therapies, but for each of you, what made the therapy effective?
I think, like, for me, every time I've been in therapy, it's felt really effective at the time, and it has been. But then, like, recently, there might be new things that have come in, so I know that I'm not fully recovered because they can kind of OCD can trick me back into certain ways of thinking or compulsions. But I think having a therapist who understands your personality and your experiences, like, I'm gay, so having a therapist who isn't going to judge that if it's relationship OCD and that's the context. Like, I think, I mean, you were speaking about barriers to treatment before, but having a therapist who you don't feel judged by, I guess, especially with OCD, because some of the thoughts are so taboo and difficult. Yeah, I think having a compassionate therapist was the most important thing to me every time. And just knowing from the get-go, like asking them what they know about OCD to check that they know everything. Not everything, but they know how it works so that you're not teaching them. I think it's really important to have, you're teaching them, but you're not teaching them what OCD is. Like, they know that from the get-go. So yeah, having good knowledge about OCD and being compassionate towards you in your entirety, I think.
Yeah, it's a really big, it's like that trust and confidence, isn't it? I would say my therapy has been most successful when my therapist has done the ERP with me and put themselves in really unusual situations to challenge OCD and to show me that actually that's okay to do. When I was really struggling with like contamination, based intrusive thoughts, and my therapist in the session would do stuff that I'd go home and I'd tell my flatmate and she'd be like, oh. I'd be like, I know that sounds weird, but you have to go past the level of normal, right, to get back to normal, whatever normal is. So having someone do that in the session and showing me that actually nothing bad's happening, I'm doing this. I won't say the things that they've done in case they end up watching or listening and they're like, oh, don't share my secrets or whatever, but the stuff that they would do, and then that would encourage me to be like, okay, well, you've gone about your day-to-day life and, you know, no one thinks badly of you, nothing bad's happened. And they kind of showed me that, and it gave me that confidence to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to do what you just did, but I can start to work towards that and challenge my OCD in that way. And then the other thing that's been really helpful is having whoever was like my closest person, having them involved in some way, whether that's coming to a session. My most recent therapy, my therapist recorded the sessions so that my partner, Freddie, could listen to them and could listen back if I wanted him to. I might be like, there's 10 minutes of that bit which I really want you to listen to, because then you'll understand what exercises I'm doing at home and how you can support me with that. Because it's very easy, as I'm sure we all know with OCD, to be like, oh no, my therapist said you can give me reassurance like 5 times today, and they don't know any different. So I would play him the recordings which would say, all right, Freddie, make sure you don't give Olivia any reassurance today, and he would know then how best to support me. So I think having that person involved was massive, because therapy is really hard, right? It's not an easy thing to do, and so having someone kind of know how they can do that with you when you're at home away from the therapy session is massive for me.
Yeah, I've got to say the practitioner makes a huge difference. Like, very similar to what you said. In the gym, if I've got a personal trainer that's too kind to me, I don't want to go back because I view them as weak. I need someone to scream at me. I almost need someone to be a bit like, you know, I'm not going to say what's said in my gym sessions, but I need someone to be harsh on me, for example, in the gym. But the practitioner makes a massive difference. And in the very first round of therapy that I got during those really hard times, it's exactly what I needed. Someone to be a bit softer, a bit kind on me. At this current moment in time, I still have a mix of that whilst I'm also learning the skills. But yeah, it's the practitioner, undoubtedly, for me, for sure.
Yeah, good point. I mean, like you say, it's building up. Like, some therapists I've heard, they go in guns blazing and then they scare people off, understandably. But then you need to read the room, right, or read the client or patient and slowly build up, which it sounds like your ones did, which is great. Because otherwise you get people who just are so against ERP and they don't need to be, and it's often because they've had a really bad experience. unnecessarily, not their fault obviously, but kind of staying on the same question, Olivia, you mentioned one, but if there's anything else that's, so Professor Veal said earlier about diet, lifestyle. I mean, how many people here went out and got a salad at lunch? Can you raise your hand? Good few people. I definitely did. Now I've had like stomach ache since, so I don't know. It's messed with my biome. But yes, is there anything like that, or exercise, or community, or sleep? Anything you've noticed that really does make a difference as well?
I actually had one before and I've forgotten it. When we were watching it, I was like, I do. I think sleep is a really big one. But yeah, and just having people that you can have a laugh with and not, at least from where I am at, like not feeling the need to be too honest with everyone in my life about how I'm doing and what I'm thinking, like knowing that you can just tell someone that you need a bit of support without going into it all every time like I would have done in the past. So I think having a support system who are willing to educate themselves on OCD is a really big one, so that they know what's going on without needing to know the content of it all the time. And I think with that kind of support system, you're in a better place, personally.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I would say like having friends who have personal experience of OCD, I found massively helpful, because you don't then need to, like you say, explain what's going on. They just get it. You're like, I'm having a bad day. I also think like being around, like for me personally, being around like pets, being around animals, like, a lot of intrusive thoughts around, oh, what if I've done something awful? What if this person hates me, etc., etc. And when you're with an animal, you're like, well, they can't think those things, right? It just kind of makes you feel like, I don't know, like a little bit more kind of at peace. The other thing I found that kind of keeps me more as well as can be is challenging myself when I'm feeling well, like putting myself in situations where I like my anxiety goes up, even if I'm not like doing ERP at the time, say with a therapist or something, and even if I'm feeling quite well at that time, being like, okay, well, I need to push myself out of my comfort zone constantly in order to kind of just keep that OCD at bay. So yeah, I find that helpful.
Amazing.
Yeah, for myself, I would say it probably is very similar to both of these two, but the gym helps to keep me very well. Even there's actually times after the gym I felt more anxious, and I'm a bit like, oh, this is a bit interesting. I'm kind of having to sit with that. Lifestyle related, so like eating the right foods. I'm not strict with my eating, but I find healthy eating quite easy. So like, I have a range of berries in my diet as much as I can. I try to protect my microbiome, because I know the stomach, well, essentially is the second brain, right? It's what someone else was speaking about. So trying to eat more of a high protein diet, I find has also really helped me as well. So it's lifestyle related, foods, but also, yeah, hanging around with the right people, really and truly. People outside of my OCD circle has massively also helped.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I mean, I take a prebiotic, have done for a couple of years now. I think it's helped, but that could be placebo, right?
Well, kimchi, kombucha, all those things are massively really good for the gut, but most of the time they don't taste nice.
No, exactly. I don't like the taste of it.
But sometimes you kind of got to just suck it up, even if it doesn't taste good. Do you know what I mean? That's true. It's a little bit of my mentality.
Yeah. That's one way I look at ERP as well, actually. It's like, it's foul-tasting medicine sometimes, but you have to take it to get better.
Yeah.
Which is where I think ACT can come in. That's like the sugar you sprinkle into the foul-tasting medicine. Anyway, there was something else I was going to say, but I'm blanking, so I'll move on. Yeah, if therapy took you many attempts, how did you find the strength to try again? And what advice would you offer to those that might be in a similar situation?
I think like I kind of remembered my other thing was like, and this relates to that too, is like keep trying again because of the life that you want to lead and like the values that are important to you. So something I go back to, even when I don't understand where the OCD is coming in and where it's, when I don't really understand what's going on, it's just like, well, how do I want to be living? What are the things I want in my life? And like, how am I moving closer to them, even with all the background noise? So I think that kind of like values-based living, that just what's important to you and how do you want to be living? And if the OCD voice wasn't as loud, what would you be doing? Yeah. And doing that even with the voice, and yeah.
You said it so eloquently, I don't feel like I can follow on, but I guess I had something then that I was just about to say and it's totally gone out of my head. OCD treatment is really hard. As I've said, like it's super hard, but it's nowhere near as hard as living with OCD, right? Like ultimately that's the end goal. And I think what I've always found helpful is just, we know waiting lists aren't great. Just get yourself on a waiting list.
Yeah.
If you're going with the NHS, you know, because you've got nothing to lose by getting on the waiting list, and that might take quite a bit of time to get to the top of that waiting list. And if you get to the top of it and you still don't feel like you can fight it at that time, that's fine. You've not lost anything by doing it. So I think just making that first step to getting the help and just putting yourself in a position where that help is on its way, and then you can choose at the time, and you might feel differently when it comes around. Yeah, just take the first step, basically.
Definitely, yeah.
I would say what convinces me to keep trying is, I often say this to a lot of people that I speak with, but I don't cry to give up now, I cry to keep going. Because if I honestly give up, I'll never know what life would be like on the other side. Whereas if I allow the temporary feelings that I have to make those permanent decisions, I would have taken my life. And that's on a very real and honest conversation. I wrote suicide notes, I was prepared to take my life, and I really wanted something to change. And now where I am, to know there's other people that really look up to me, and to know that my story will change someone else's life is what inspires me to honestly keep going. And like, I can't even put that into words sometimes, you know. There's so many times I've wanted to give up, you know. But yeah, I've got a lot of people that look up to me, and there's a lot of people that value me and love me. And for people that are struggling right now really badly with OCD, you can still live life with it. I still have really dark, hard moments, but I always just try to remember it's temporary. So that is what inspires me to keep going. And really and truly, I've got main character syndrome, so always want to be at the front of attention, you know, the front. So I have to remind myself, damn, if I take my life now, who's going to show up to the world just as good as me? But no, on a very real, yeah, it's got to be, there's people that really look up to me, and there's other people that say to me, Shaun, your story's kept me going, your story has kept me alive, so yeah.
Nice one. Yeah, like what you said there about main character, reminds me of like the hero's journey. For those that are familiar with it, like The Hobbit is a perfect example. He gets called to action or to adventure. He doesn't want to go. He then says, I'm going on an adventure. He runs out the Shire. He faces untold pain, and I'm trying to remember the whole thing. He starts to triumph a bit. There's more adversity. He eventually triumphs, returns back to the Shire. And then throughout life, you go on multiple hero's journeys. But I love looking at life that way because it keeps you going. You go, I'm just in Mordor right now, you know? And it's horrible. But the Shire's coming. And maybe 10 years later, I'll be in Mordor again. That's horrible, but it's also okay. And then I'll be in the Shire again, yeah? So yeah, I like what you said there. And the other thing, kind of, you all advocate, right? And you all are therefore giving to others, giving your time. And that reminds me of Man's Search for Meaning, the book, Viktor Frankl, and I can't remember the exact quote, but when you find meaning in suffering in some way, it can no longer be suffering. And for me, when I started the podcast, that's why I started it. I was in the pits, and it was like, if I'm going to suffer, someone else might as well benefit from it. And so you don't have to advocate, but it could just be, I don't know, volunteer at a soup kitchen, smile at someone on the street, you know, because many people are having their own battle, and maybe you smiling could make a world of difference to them. It could be the smallest action, but it can have the biggest impact.
Yeah, even just advocating for yourself to begin with, for the treatment that you deserve, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. Or maybe if that's too much because there's shame and I don't love myself enough, or there's trauma blocking that, can I advocate for others? Then maybe eventually I'll realise that I'm equally worthy. Yeah, really good point. So, you know, what messages or insights would you like to share with the audience members who might be feeling unsure about seeking treatment or even deserving treatment?
I think it's a really tricky one. I know what it feels like to feel like you don't deserve treatment, or you shouldn't be going back and getting more treatment, because like I said, you feel like you should have remembered everything from the first time you went or whatever it might be, or you might have had a really negative experience with treatment. And we speak to lots of people on the helpline who've not necessarily had the best experience, and it can be really hard to then be told, try it again, like go back and try it again. But I guess all I can say from personal experience is I tried it numerous times and it didn't work for whatever reason. Like I said, it wasn't the right time. I wasn't willing to engage. It doesn't mean that the therapist was necessarily bad, but it just wasn't right at that time. But it has worked since, and I went back, and it wasn't easy to do, and it took a long time, but it did work then. And it's not to say I won't need more therapy in the future, because I probably will. But that's all I can say really, is that from experience, I went back and it was hard to do, but it really, really did work, and it really made a massive difference, and I got my life back from OCD, and everybody deserves to be that way, you know, to live a life without OCD, to live a life that isn't controlled by this condition. And no matter how bad it gets, and it does get really, really bad, no matter how bad it gets, it can get better, like genuinely from personal experience. So that would be my message.
Yeah, similar. Like, I think it's just such a difficult condition, and it's so complicated. It feels like so multifaceted. It feels like it comes out in so many different ways in your life. And I think just knowing that it can quieten down, and it doesn't need to, like you say, control your life. And even if that's just the goal, is just to get a bit more free, and knowing that you deserve that. And I think, big self-compassion, constant, like, whatever self-compassion means to you, but constant practicing of that in order that you feel like, that you're deserving of a life freer from OCD.
Yeah, true. 100% you deserve treatment. To anyone out there who is sitting there probably thinking that their mistakes or their illness is making them feel like they don't deserve treatment, you 100% do deserve it. I've believed I was everything: rapist, paedophile, suicidal, everything. And at the core of it, there was something that believed that I still deserved it no matter what. And there's people that really do struggle in silence, and I can't put it into words just how much that even if you haven't, you've had a relapse, it doesn't mean you failed. There's many times in life you're going to go back. And I think Carl Jung said it best. He said, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. And if you've been in hell, you know what it's like to dine in heaven quite often, is what I would say.
Yeah, often anyone that is awesome in this world, when you speak to them, they've got this, I won't say dark history, but you know what I mean, of just pain and suffering. Maybe they even go through it currently, and that's what makes them incredible, because they learn so much in that process. But I was thinking about this question on the way in, and I just thought, if you have a pulse, you deserve treatment. There's no, that's the baseline, there's no, and obviously there's many people that reject and resist compassion, and a good therapist will work with those barriers, and especially if there's particular traumas there might be a lot of shame under I don't deserve it, or maybe I did something bad, but you're also worthy of treatment and forgiveness. So look, I'm at time. I'm going to ask one more question, because I'm a bad boy. So I always ask on the podcast at the end, if you have a billboard wherever you live, whatever town that is, what do you want written on that billboard?
I think you've asked me this before, and my answer was so bad. I wish I'd thought of a better one.
And now there's an audience.
I know.
In terms of around OCD or just life?
Anything, yeah, absolutely anything.
Come on, Mairéad, I think you can come up with something brilliant.
Oh, God,
put it on you.
It's the hardest question. I'd say, just say whatever comes to mind. Don't censor it.
If you're in pain, you might as well get a reward from it. Honestly, you might as well, if you're crying, you're breaking down in tears, you might as well dig something out of it, learn something from it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think be compassionate, because I think there's so many of our collective problems, and personal too, come from systems and societies where there's lack of compassion for each other and for the most vulnerable. So I think that's kind of applicable for OCD, but just wider society.
True.
Oh no, the pressure, the time pressure as well. I would just say, you deserve to be here. You deserve to be here, and you deserve support. I'm going to leave it at that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much.